Good evening, everyone. This is Lowman02. I'm going to do a quick deck tech over a deck that I played today in the player run event, the Chainsaw Massacre, held every Saturday at 15:30 or 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can register on gatherling.com, and if you care for a more in-depth look at the deck itself, as I'll do a relatively short deck tech today, the list is actually up there from the event dated 10 December. So as you look over this deck, really what you have is a mid-range Izzet deck that strives to beat other mid-range decks that run 2 and or 3 colors with cards like Blood Moon, um, Magus of the Moon, and then back to basics. As you can see, our basic land count is extremely high inside this deck, with most of the non-basics being fetch lands and or a couple utility lands. Of note, we do run 2 man lands, the Fairy Conclave, and then the Wandering Funeral. But really, at the end of the day, what it's looking to do is beat the mid-range value decks, the 3-color decks, and it also has a lot of punch-up against control. So as far as bad matchups for this deck, really what you're looking at is mono red, and then because of the meta that we currently have inside the CSM, you'll see a lot of anti-green cards as well, such as Hibernation, Washout, Acid Rain, Bribery, really an anti-green card. And then dual purpose, you have Flash Freeze in there for both. You have a Miser Anarchy as well, just in case we do run into any mono white decks. And then really the rest of the sideboard itself is geared towards beating red decks, because I think that's one of the worst matchups pre-board for this deck. And because I generally assume I'm going to lose the first round that I play against mono red, I know I'm going to need to win the next two. One of them in which I'll be on the draw, which makes it a little more challenging. So with all that said, if you care to check out the deck tech or the deck list itself, please jump onto Gatherling and check out the event for the Chainsaw Massacre that occurred today, 10 December. We'll jump into the games right quick. Okay, so the deck ended up going 3-1, made it to finals. I'm going to go through each of the games. So our first game was against Dion Mag, again, similar to our last round. Oddly enough, I think we've been paired against Dion in our first round the last 3 times we played in the Massacre. So we'll kick it off. Okay, so we have opening hand. We're pretty sure that Dion is yet again going to be on mono black with splash white zombies. Back to basics, not a phenomenal card. Do have Cryptic Command for a longer term play. But I also know he plays a decently high non-basic count. I think as you'll see, it really doesn't come into play. I think we end up fogging out one of his lands. But with Splinter Twin in hand, I feel like we can definitely get there with this hand. And the Cryptic is a good comeback from behind card, so we end up keeping it. Lead off Spire Bluff Canal. Didn't want to see the Swamp. Force of Will, great draw. So if there's anything that happens that's completely busted, which I'm not really expecting out of him, then we'll have an answer to it. Continue to pass the turn back and forth for a bit. See a reflecting pool, and at this point I see my opportunity to utilize my back to basics. Draw Repeal at this point in time. Not a bad card. Not a lot of use for it right now, though. So you'll see us at this point in time play our back to basics, essentially getting rid of one of Dion's lands and limiting him on what he can cast. He gets in for 2. No actions taken from us. We see him cycle a non-basic. And we end up pulling a Mystic Confluence. Strong card, but really right now we're kind of stuck and don't have a lot going on. We're happy to see a Temple of Silence come out. The Scry lands that come into play tapped really aren't going to have much of an effect against back to basics outside of just a land drop and a Scry. As you can see, we bounce the Zombie Master in order to get deeper in our deck and get more land. Flame Slash to answer it finally, leaving 3 land up with the possibility of repeal. We do go ahead and Force of Will that. We don't want the opponent to start getting up on cards. And we play on our Jace to start hunting for more lands. Unfortunately for us, no lands to be found. So we do play a Wandering Funeral out just in case he does end up dealing with the back to basics. Okay, good rip there with the Snapcaster Mage. We go ahead and cast the Snapcaster and Flame Slash the Leonis Reaver so that Dion does not chew apart our hand. Chainer's Edict, fine by me. Redraw the Splinter Twin, and we see the True Name Nemesis, which is a great card. We do recognize that there is a Chainer's Edict in the graveyard. Obviously did not know he was going to mortify our back to basics. And I figure here what he's doing is casting the Chainer's Edict to get rid of the True Name. I'm happy when he hard cast Entreat the Angels. As you see, I have a lot of options in my hand that can deal with those, and the Jace on board that can deal with it very easily. So we impulse, finding an additional land. That's what we're looking for right now. Go ahead and play our land out, and at this point in time, we pass it back and leave up our Mystic Confluence, planning on bouncing the Angels and drawing or countering a spell. And we go for the draw, get the island off top, and we see Chainer's Edict come back and get rid of our True Name Nemesis. Draw Wasteland at this point in time. Right now, we're really hunting. Right now, we're really just biding our time. So we have a Jason play, and we can easily use this to win. With the Torrential Gearhulk in play, we're happy to let time pass, as we have either an ambusher or a decent-sized threat, plus a recursion of one of our spells. As you see, we do Mystic Confluence, forcing him to pay 3, which he cannot, and then drawing 2 cards. Our Trail Island, not great draws, but we're that much deeper. Go ahead and suspend Ancestral Visions. See Crystal Vein on top of his deck after we activate our Jace. We'll continue to do this for some time in order to force him to continue to commit to the board. We go ahead and repeal that, the Orzhov Signet, our key rune rather. In order to get a little deeper in our deck, we find a Scry land, see Sidisi come out, ends up staying on as a blocker, and should be 2 counters left on the Ancestral Visions. Go ahead and Preordain. We don't keep either of those cards. See Faith Fetters on top. We're fine with that. We'll end up bouncing it off of our Jace. See Unmake come out. See Faith Fetters get played, which I think in retrospect he probably should have attacked first. Once he's activated all of his, once he's activated his Key Rune and played Faith Fetters, I go ahead and Cyclonic Rift the whole board. Play out my Wasteland, and I believe hit the Crystal Vein in order to limit his mana production. Playing out Batterskull right before I do that. Key Rune is back, and I think we see, yep, Faith Fetters comes back again, and we go ahead and Mana Leak that so we can have our Jace online. He go for the Throats, our Batterskull, yeah, and given right now we have less than 3 mana available to us, so we're going to have to pass it back. We have so much mana at this point, though, I believe we end up recurring it back to our hand and recasting it in our second main. Yep. So we cast that. We feel pretty comfortable. We have Lightning Bolt to deal with the Shambling Vent, and we also can block the Orzhov Key Rune if he decides to attack with that very successfully with the Germ. That's what he indeed does. So we had to go ahead and block the Key Rune, Lightning Bolt, the Shambling Vent. He casts something that regenerates that creature and gives it +2, +0. But we do have a Mental Misstep available to us, and we hard cast that, countering that effect. Ancestral Visions comes off the comes out of Suspend this turn. We draw a lot of nonsense and continue to beat it with the Batterskull and get Jace set up to mill his entire deck. We see him sack Sidisi, which means he's probably going for Vindicate or something like that. Hero's Downfall. When we see the Hero's Downfall come out, we know the opponent's tapped out. We go ahead and play our Deceiver Exarch. And given we have a Splinter Twin in hand, we have for some time, we start making an army of Deceiver Exarchs, and opponent has us play it out, which we do in decent time. And that is game 1. Game 2, significantly shorter, but a little bit of a stronger keep this time. So we've got Spell Snare, which is always great to see when you're on the play. We don't see anything that we can get with it out of the opponent's hand, but we leave that up, plus Daze. If we sack our Mace, it Daze is live. If the opponent's willing to pass it back to us every turn, we're happy with that. We can play Control, and we can really play Aggro or Midrange as well with this deck. So we've hit the required 4 mana to get Factor Fiction out. We see him play a Cemetery Reaper, which we could have interacted with, but why? We end up using our Factor Fiction and save the Is It Charm in hand to get rid of it. Go ahead and hit it with the Is It Charm, and then discard 1 and pass it back. We see Sorin Lord of Innistrad, Mana Leak, ripe target for it, and opponent concedes at that point in time. Maybe a little premature, but I think we were in a very favorable condition. We had our land drop for sure next turn, which gives us the Torrential Gearhulk, and we're going to either recurse Cryptic Command on the opponent's turn to get rid of something and draw a card, plus have a 5/6 in play, or we're going to hit Factor Fiction and get 2 to 3 cards off of that, plus a 5/6 in play. So very favored to win. I don't know if it was a psychic play by the opponent or if the opponent just had enough of blue counters and blue tricks. But it was a good game and well played by Dion. Our next game is against our good buddy Sugar Daddy. He is on Reanimator. This first game, we get pummeled quite handily. So as you see, we start off with not a great hand. I end up keeping this because Stifle I have found to be pretty decent against his deck. I feel like if I can get into his mana situation, which is very greedy, that I can successfully beat him. So what you'll see me do is leave Stifle up with Bizarre Baghdad. Although it doesn't produce mana, it's very powerful in this deck because he's looking to get essentially one punch knockouts, kind of similar to the Cheater's Prospect or Prosper deck that I was playing in the duel with Michelle. End up going ahead and impulsing. Know that the Hermit Druid is going to activate, and I'm really hoping at this point when he activates that he hits the Emrakul so that his graveyard goes away. Unfortunately for us, he hits the swamp, the basic swamp first, and is able to conduct or play Necromancy on Jin-Gitaxias. So, no, at this point, I think this is a misplay by the opponent. If I'm not mistaken, he does have a Gristlebrand. Yes, he does in his graveyard. I think the proper play was to Necromancy for the Gristlebrand, especially at 17 life. Jin-Gitaxias will erase my hand, but he has used a Thoughtseize on us and should know that we do have a Flame Tongue Kabu, which we obviously we play out here because we don't want to delete our entire hand. So we do get his Jin, but with him having already drawn 7 cards, even if it is a misplay, he's pretty favored, and I kind of know from this point. The writing's on the wall for us. So we see him play on Academy Rector. That just basically means we're not attacking with our Flame Tongue Kavu, because I know in that deck what we'll end up getting is Omniscience, which I really can't beat. We go ahead and take the 3 stack. Really what I'm looking for is Spell Snare. So some of the most dangerous spells that Sugar Daddy runs in that deck cost 2 or 3 mana. And what I'm thinking is like Exhume, Animate Dead, those kind of effects. And you'll see what ends up getting me is a Diabolic Intent this turn on the Academy Rector, which ends up putting the Omniscience into play, which I was also thinking about as well, because even though Diabolic Intent will enable him to sacrifice the Academy Rector and really search and get into play what he's looking for, which is the Omniscience with that card. If I'm able to counter the demonic intent or Diabolic Intent, then he will be unable to find the Emrakul that I know goes along with the casting of that spell. Unfortunately, as you see as it plays out, he ends up having another card that can do that for him. So he casts his 3 mana tutor, Diabolic Intent, which we were kind of one of the 3 cards we were kind of hoping to prevent with the Spell Snare. We go ahead and get rid of it. We see Omniscience come out of the deck and into the board, and he has Time of Need available. At this point, I know this deck very well. I play with it a decent bit myself, and I know I'm just dead. That's going to be an Emrakul. He'll have essentially a Time Walk for free off the Omniscience because you're technically casting it off of it, and he'll swing in, and I only have 6 permanents in play and 19 life, so not worth playing out. All right, game 2. So, I was asked by a player after this event if I felt like I was favored in this matchup because the board in this deck really does not have a lot of Reanimator hate. And I really do think I am. I think this deck is extremely favored in this matchup due to the greed of the mana base. So we play 3 moon effects, Blood Moon, Back to Basics, and Magus the Moon. Main, and in a deck like the one Sugar Daddy's playing right now, Prismatic deck, there's a lot of need for varied mana sources, and you have to really stretch what you're able to do with it. If Blood Moon and Back to Basics and Magus the Moon had never been printed, I think it would be much more viable. But it is greedy in this format because folks do play Blood Moon. Mono Red plays Blood Moon, and this deck does specifically as well. Really not to shore this matchup up, which it does, but to shore up the mid-range matchup. So we do get our Ancestral Visions off. Sugar Daddy attempts to cast his Notion Thief. I know that I have the win on top of my deck, but what I'm trying to play around is I don't want him to draw 3 cards and get a Path to Exile or Dismember and just blow me out. So I end up, thinking it's probably the smartest play to get my 3 cards. It ends up being right because we end up getting Magus of the Moon off the top, which really shuts his deck's ability to win down. And at this point, he casts a Dark Petition. I believe he gets Firestorm because he doesn't have the ability to get black mana off of it because there's not enough sorceries or instants in the graveyard. And we end up getting it with Mental Misstep. At this point in time, we go for the Splinter Twin combo, and we make 3 crush and 2 total Pester Mites attack for the win with lethal. So good game, a little bit more of a lockout game, but when an opponent's on Reanimator, all's fair in Love and War. All right, so we look at this hand again. We have Magus. We're just going to run it back because Magus is that good against this deck. Um, Interesting play. So we end up playing the island first. What I was thinking is I want to have Days Up the first turn, just in case he has some ridiculous draw where he can, get something I can't beat into play turn 1 or turn 2. Play out the Spire Bluffs Canal. Next, we do let Dak Faden resolve, even though we could have countered it with Daze, because really what we're interested in is getting to our third land drop so we can play the Magus of the Moon. From this point, even though he's able to filter through a lot of cards, his deck only runs one basic swamp. So he's going to have to get, some of the artifact mana he runs, like Chrome Box or Mox Diamond, in order to fix his mana or find his one basic swamp. Um, the cards that he runs that he can, so he can play to some extent around Magus and or Blood Moon. He does have Through the Breach and Sneak Attack available to him in the deck. So those are the cards that really, only cards that I'm worried about and need to look out for outside of him playing something that's capable of provide or generating mana other than red at this point in time. So we see Sneak Attack come out, but we do at this point have 5 mana, and we fire off Mana Confluence at it, countering it because you can't pay for 3 and then drawing 2 cards. This point in time, I think you'll see me play out Thing, correction, Snap. We'll Snap, Bolt, get rid of the Dak Faden, just cause him to quit drawing. At this point in time, we've got a 3-turn clock in play, and he's really helpless to do much of anything. We do play out the Thing this turn and then leave up our counter magic package, leaving Kiki Jiki in hand. So right now, really what I'm doing is just trying to play around, like something like Firestorm or Nahiri's Wrath. So I'm going to leave the Kiki Jiki in hand. I don't need to show it, and he knows it at this point in time and concedes the game. Overall, good games against Sugar Daddy. And you do kind of hate to win with a prison lock, but like I said, when an opponent's on Reanimator, they've had to stretch the mana base to a very, very large extent. And, with that kind of power, there does come associated risk. So sometimes you just get gotten by a moon effect. Okay, so the next game is against Frysik, and I didn't expect to get paired up against this opponent, and I was, kind of lamenting the fact that I was. So, like I said, I think this deck's worst pre-board matchup is against Mono Red, which we know this player to be on. Luckily, we have a very strong hand, and we keep with a Pyromancer, a Vidillion Click to start off with, and the back to basics is kind of junk. That was kind of a blank, so I was already at 6. But I had a Batter Skull in hand as well, which is a very, very strong play. Now, interestingly enough, I don't think this deck, the version I run, does not run a lot of non-basics, but he does have a G2 encampment play. So the back to basics is a fine play here. Honestly, it makes perfect sense to play it out. We're going to lose one of our lands here, play Batter Skull out, but by next turn we'll have Mana Confluence up, which should help prevent what we've seen in his hand, or what his hand consists of. So we attack in. He attempts to do a Flames of the Blood hand. What we do is we counter this spell, draw 1, and then push back the paralyzed creature. He'll play the Abbot back out. Does not find a land, ends up ditching the card, and that's kind of, I wanted to tie his mana up so I can gain as much life while he's replaying spells. And I get it, there's value off Abbot, but like you can see, it's just too much tempo for him, and he knows the game's over. So I feel very fortunate to have won the very first game. When we get into game 2, this is the first time we really sideboard significantly. I don't think we sideboarded the first 2 games. So we view the sideboard. We ended up pulling in. We took out Vidalcan Shackles. I think it's way too slow. Back to Basics is out. Magus of the Moon, Blood Moon's out. Brought in Hydroblast, Blue Elemental Blast, Flash Freeze, Flash Flood, and I believe we also brought in our 2 artifacts that gain us life, the Dragon's Claw and Sun Droplet. So had a significant amount to bring in. You'll see, I think 2 of the cards come into play in this game. Sideboarding helps, and this match is much weaker initial hand. But because of the board plan and because we have the Blue Elemental Blast and we've gotten rid of some of the clunkier things going on in the deck, we're able to really get after the opponent. So we get one of our 2 damage comes into play tap lands up to 2 mana. At this point in time, we have Mishra's Factory plus the 1/1 coming in, the Stone Right. We go ahead and Incinerate for mana efficiency on the Mishra's Factory as opposed to using the Magma Spray. because I expect most of his creatures do have toughness 2. I want to spend the more expensive spell. I really don't plan on going to the face. So we go to Electrolyze here, do 1 damage to the creature and 1 damage to him. We get Bag Magenta to the face, completely fine with that. Yeah, it'll help his top deck, but it's not going to bother us all that much. Alright, so we're up to our 4th land, which is great, so we know we are up on Cryptic Command at this point. We see an Abbot, and we go ahead here and Cryptic Command this and draw another card. Really, what we're trying to do is find our next land so we can get Goblin Dark Dwellers on the ground and have a recurring threat. But we find something, almost just as good, which is the Thing in the Ice. Consideration here is using Ice to tap down one of his lands, but because I'm more worried about haste threats, I go ahead and leave his land alone and just end up getting a misstep, hard casting a misstep on a Chain Lightning, and then leaving up my mana until I can get to that 5th land. Go ahead and ice one of his lands at end step. I believe he cast a Stagger Shock, which I Blue Elemental Blast. Rather not take 4 damage from that thing. Not that I'm that low, but I don't want to get there either. Grab a mountain. At this point in time, we go ahead and hardcast our Goblin Dark Dwellers. Something happens with the UI on this, and the Electrolyze should have gone to face. Flipped the Thing in the Ice, doing effectively 9 off the Electrolyze plus the thing, converting to a 7/8, and pushing the Goblin Dark Dwellers back to my hand, which would have given me recursion of another spell. We see Everlasting Torment come into play. Go ahead and flip it back into his hand. Flip over our Awoken Horror. We find our Sun Droplet at this point in time. Go ahead and play it, although we really don't expect, we don't have Counter Magic in hand to do much because, I'm half expecting him probably to play that back next turn, although he doesn't really have the luxury to do that. More techie play, we go ahead and Magma Spray our own Grim Lavamancer here, just so we don't take the 3 damage. Pretty techie, but I mean, it was fine here, and we knew we pretty much had the win anyways because we have the Goblin Dark Dwellers in hand, which he knows about, and we have Incinerate, Electrolyze, etc. inside the graveyard that we'll be able to dome him with after hitting him one more time with the Awoken Horror. Okay, so on to finals. Finals, again, against Michelle Wong. Unfortunately, lost this one. Had a rough draw in the last round. This first game here, bad keep. I end up keeping it, though, because, I know Michelle's deck is not fast, and I want to hit land drops every turn. So I'll play on Scalding Tarn. I believe I fetch for one of my non-basics here. Yep. End up playing down another land, drawing well off the top. Really, the Muldrift you'll see makes this hand come together. And I do not play it turn 3. I'm looking to try to get the thing down as a recurring threat as well. Pull up Force of Will, great pull. Flame Slash, getting rid of the Trinket Mage. Fine card and Magus of the Moon. I end up actually playing it out because, if she wants to counter it, then great. If she doesn't, then I'll just continue to hit her for 2 damage. I don't think it's great in this matchup whatsoever, but I frankly don't care if my Steam Vents becomes a basic mountain either. Play out Volcanic Island, which is essentially a basic mountain. We get a Repulse to the face, and then we cast our Muldrifter after she's tapped out for Repulse, which is great. We get 2 more lands, but we're deeper in the deck, and we're up on cards from her. See Humility come into play. I'm fine with that. I can wait a while. I've got means of bouncing it, getting rid of it. So I just start attacking for 1 with the Muldrifter, and I just, leave cards in my hand. Another land. I'm getting a lot of lands here. But we really don't have much else going on. Snapcaster's dead at this point because, 1, I don't have anything in the graveyard, and 2, it's just going to be a 1/1 when it comes into play, so its ETB won't trigger. We see her Impulse. At this point, she's very much so sculpting her hand. So at this point, we're up on cards, but she has manipulated her deck quite a bit. So we're a little nervous about that, but we are still the one with the 1/1 in the play, 1/1 in play. So we keep on charging in there. We see her cast Mystic Confluence, going up to 9 cards on the draw step. And she plays on Light Intruder for Batterskull, if I'm not mistaken. And we keep on charging in there with our 1/1. And we see a Wall of Omens. Not a great play. It doesn't cycle anymore, and I guess it's just there to block my Muldrifter. I'll leave my Muldrifter be. I'm kind of hoping at some point that I'll be able to get rid of Humility and continue to attack with a 2/2. And or, I'll flip it back to my hand at some point after I've done the same and draw some cards off of it. So we go ahead, strike in with the Muldrifter after flipping with Repeal. Recast Magus of the Moon to try to fog out the Caracas and the Celestial Colonnade. It doesn't work. We get Cryptic Commanded. It's all right. Humility comes back down. Say okay. And then we see a Jace the Mind Sculptor. Now, one thing, I think it was probably better for her to look at my top deck. I think she should know that. Well, she sees Flame Slash. She should know I'm playing Burn. And right here, we're kind of really able to get her. I mean, she cycled Jace for for one of the top 3 cards in her deck, which I don't think is worth it. We Chain Lightning the Jace and get rid of it. All right, we see Batterskull come down. And if I'm not mistaken, we flip it. Yep, we flip everything back to her hand, get a Vendilion Click, which is a great draw. Even though she has Caracas in play, you'll see that it's able to get in there a little bit. No one really wants to put Vendilion Click back in your hand if you haven't played with the card. I think there we got rid of Humility. That had gotten annoying. We wanted to close the game out at this point. All right, we see a Wormcoil come down. I'm fine with that because, you know, I have Pestermite, Deceiver, Exarch, which is really able to get after the Wormcoil not attacking me. Now, I probably misplay here. I was probably playing quick because we're using a lot of time up. I end up tapping it there. I probably should have waited to tap it. I just want to start getting the beats in. Force her to use her Caracas against my Vendilion Click and allow me to fog her draw. Hopefully something worse than whatever she has in her hand. We see her hand next, and her hand is amazing when we do this. I think she has Force of Will. She has a Sphinx's Revelation, so effectively she has 14 or 15 cards in hand is what it ends up looking like. So really what you see we're trying to do, we are not a control deck. Yes, we play counter spells. Really we're a tempo deck. So yes, we are lower on resources right now. But we're trying to prevent her or force her to be less efficient than we are. And I think we do a pretty good job in this game. I think it's really highlighted in this game how much mana she needs to spend to get the impact she's looking to get. She goes up to 8 life. We tap down Wormcoil Engine. At this point, we know we're getting through for at least 5 damage. Likely not the additional 3 off the Vendilion Click, because my expectation is that it'll get flipped. Now we see Vidalcan Shackles come in, Snapcaster Mage to cast a Cyclonic Rift. Curious play there. We could have repealed the Shackles, but I'm kind of worried about misdirection, or correction, not misdirection, but misdirection being played there, or miscalculation, costing us 2 more to play it. But in retrospect, maybe that would have been fine because she wouldn't have been able to tap out at that point in time to grab my Vendilion Click, and she wouldn't have been able to bounce it with Caracas. So what you'll see her steal the Vendilion Click at this point in time. I've drawn a Complicate, which I go ahead and cycle right away, get a land, crack land, trying to thin the deck, grab that, play out Jace, and we get really lucky here. For some reason, she cast this right before the attack step, which is amazing. So we exclude it. She cycles her miscalc, which we correctly guessed she was on, and then we end up hitting a Magma Spray, which allows us to get rid of our own Vendilion Click and attack in for exactly lethal. And that's really a great show of the tempo this deck's capable of. Okay, on to game 2. Go ahead and play out Jace Vryn's Prodigy. Thinking she has a counter. Nope. Instead of getting to keep it, we see Vidalcan Shackles, which is kind of annoying. We really don't want to see that card. It's kind of a pain in the butt. We play out the Deceiver. She takes the Jace Vryn's Prodigy. So at this point, we're attacking in for our 1, and really what we're looking to do is get to Goblin Dark Dweller so we can threaten her life total and close the game out quickly. Nothing, so we continue to hold the Cryptic Command, which we have in hand. Firebolt goes to face. And then we see a Factor Fiction, which at this point in time, we do Cryptic Command, bouncing the Vidalcan Shackles. So again, tempo. We want her to replay that and then have to re-grab our Jace Vryn's Prodigy. Plus, when we started playing this, I was very curious as to why she took that card specifically, because I don't think she knew. Actually, I know she didn't know when I talked to her after the match that once that thing flips into a Planeswalker, it'll come back under my control, which I'm 100% fine with. Yeah, she gets free loots out of it, but it's not that great. So we go ahead and hardcast Force of Will. It doesn't work. It gets negated. We kind of didn't expect it to work. She pluses up, so we need to attack into it. Go ahead and strike in with our Deceiver Exarch. She blocks with the Jace Vryn's Prodigy, flipping it, putting it back under our control. At this point in time, we go ahead and plus. We're waiting for her to attack with Gideon. We go ahead and tap down with Ice, getting another land, a Blood-Soaked Mire. So we see a Jace come up. We go ahead and cast Pyroblast on it. She Hydroblast again. She tries to draw the 3 cards, and we burn the Jace out prior to that trigger resolving, so she can't get counter magic. So she ends up with 1 additional card and no Jace, which is a pretty good exchange, I think, on what we end up spending for it. So we go ahead and we go ahead and get rid of Jace. I could have swore we factor fiction there. Okay, so she grabs the 1/4, the Deceiver Exarch. We go ahead and cast our factor fiction. We end up taking. It's arguable that the other pile was correct. I don't know. So we stifle this to keep our life total decent. Um, Play our island out next turn after she plays an Elspeth. And at this point, I'm kind of lamenting not having Anarchy because it would be a great card right here. We basically get rid of all our decent threats. We get a Python Needle, which basically is going to say Kiki Jiki doesn't work anymore. All right, Goblin Dark Dwellers goes. We go ahead and draw 2, discard 2, getting a Venser Shaper Savant, which is fine. It's not a bad one. As you can see, though, the game starts to unravel here. I thought it was a pretty gutsy play to give me back the Deceiver Exarch. But then again, I don't know what control she has in her hand. So we send this burn, if I'm not mistaken. No, we cast the Venser Shaper Savant on our own Goblin Dark Dweller. But unfortunately, she has a Torrential Gear Hulk, which you'll see is able to get her a lot of cards off of the Factor Fiction. We give her counter magic or 2 creatures plus a land for the counter magic hand. At this point, we're pretty sure the game's over. It's not looking good for home team here. All right, we lose our Venser, and we get hit down to, I believe, 2 here. Yep. And top deck island. We go ahead and play it out. We'll make her kill us. We steal her shackles, which this deck would have been really nice a long time ago. And Aven Mind Sensor, I guess, for lulls, and we play our B-Skull. Elspeth gives a +3/+3 flying to the token, and she strikes over the top of our heads for lethal. All right, so at this point in time, you can see the game. She's at 3 minutes, and I'm at 4 minutes and 18 seconds. You know, I don't like to win by clock. In this last game here, and I think one of us likely would have lost by clock. Here, you didn't see the first couple mulls that we took. We had to mull down to 5. We only get a 1-lander. We don't get one off the top. We end up finding a Bloodstained Mire, but we're not sacking them at this point in time because we need to get more land. Anarchy's strong. We have a DAC to really draw through some of this stuff. And then we have some strong cards like Counterspell. But really, we know we've missed 3 lands. We know we're probably going to lose this match, even though, we could possibly time her out. So we see Shadow of Doubt get cast here, and I just kind of laugh. I let it resolve and then sack my Wooded Foothills, just knowing that I'm going to lose. We see Gideon come down, and I let her kill me with it. At this point, the game's over. It's unfortunate that, we had to lose this way in the finals, but, it happens. It's Magic. Sometimes you just get a bad draw, and there's nothing you can do about it. But I will say this, great games, well played by all opponents. Definitely enjoyed this Saturday's CSM. And if you're interested in taking a deck like this to the tourney, I'd recommend it. U-Moon is a very great deck. Unfortunately, I didn't get to play the specific matchup the deck is designed to beat, which is like the 2 and 3 color mid-range decks. It does very well against those. So one thing I would note, and I kind of talked about earlier, is the sideboarding against dump control. Control is not a heavily played archetype in our meta. And some people would look at the deck I'm playing and think it's control. I don't really think it is. I think it's more of a mid-range or aggro control style deck. But the board itself is very focused on green-based decks because I think they're very strong in this format, and red decks because I think this deck just has a tougher time with mono red decks than it does with all other builds. So you see the board is very strongly weighted towards those 2 things. I think if you were to look at a more control-heavy meta, you could look at cards like Fevered Visions, which are not per se great against other mid-range or aggro decks because they can just play cards fast, just as fast or faster than you. But against the control decks, they can't, or their cards are irrelevant against resolved threats like Fevered Visions. And a free 2 damage every turn plus additional cards every turn is definitely a thing. When we play Counter Magic too, so while they may be drawing, they're taking 2 regardless every turn, and we can continue to just draw cards and counter their effects. But at the end of the day, very strong deck, a very strong aggro control style mid range deck. And I do like the fact that it does have the out to the Splinter Twin Kiki Jiki combo with the Deceiver Exarch and Pestermite, plus the Zealous Conscripts. I think if you're going to play a control style deck, you want it to be more of a tempo based deck. And the other viable form of it, really in this format is the one you see Michelle playing, which is Azorius, because it has decent game against the most aggressive strategies due to the white in the white mixed in with the blue. But I think where it sometimes can struggle is against more combo based strategies. I mean, in other strategies that have the capability to inhibit her development of mana or get under her curve, really. So like mono white weenie. I played against this deck that she's playing and beat quite handily, even though she has wrath effects. It tends, if she misses one land, the game is pretty much over. Whereas I think a deck like this, if you miss a land, as you saw, we did die here, but you won't always per se because you have a lot of outs to just drawing one card and winning the game on the spot, which I tend to like. And I think if you look back at how Modern used to be when Splinter Twin was a thing before it was banned, I think the deck really allowed fair control decks to play in the format. And now you don't really see that as much. You see Nahiri-based combo style control decks. But anyways, great deck. I do recommend you give it a shot. If you enjoyed the videos, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up or let me know any terrible misplays I made in the game. I appreciate it, and you guys all have a good night.